guys, today I'm going to finally tell you what happened to Hope last month. Big vet dramas. Basically, long story short, he's got immune-mediated thrombocytopenia, which is an autoimmune disease where his immune cells attack his platelets. Platelets are the part of your blood that help for blood clotting. So if you start bleeding and you can't clot, you're just going to keep bleeding, and that's really bad. Hello, he's really greedy at the moment. But yes, it was a really big drama. We ended up having to see a specialist and just go through all this kind of stuff. So let's tell a story while he's looking for food, because he thinks there's some in my pocket over there. Anyway, so first thing I noticed, his voice changed, but he seemed fine that day. Very strange. Second day, fine in the morning, but was really unhappy in the afternoon. And yeah, just like quiet, didn't really want to eat, kind of just curled up. And yeah, but the next day he was fine again. And he goes through these periods where you know, like he'll seem sick or sad or moody every now and then, but then the next day he's fine. So I just thought maybe it's that, apart from a voice change, which was really strange. But then the day after that, same thing as day 2, where he was fine in the morning and then really sad in the afternoon. And did you throw up that day? I think the first day his voice changed, he threw up as well, but it didn't look like anything bad. Anyway, so day 4, when he was feeling sick again, with the voice change and just, yeah, I was like, this doesn't feel right. So I took him into the vet the next day and explained all his symptoms. I've got like this extensive list, which I've also put on Facebook. Like this whole saga is extensively documented on Facebook, but it's my personal Facebook, so you can't see it, so I have to tell you the story now. But yeah, so when I took him to the vet, she did a blood test on him. I think there are 2 parts of the blood test. One is like the count of like all the red blood cells, and I've learned all these little terms like reticulocytes, which are baby blood cells, and platelets and whatever, white blood cells and so on. Now on that, for most things he tested fine, like, you know, it was looking also at like, could he have diabetes? Could he have some liver problem? No, all that's fine. The main thing was, I think at that time his red blood cells were fine, but his reticulocytes, the baby blood cells, were high, indicating they were trying to replace something, so there might be some bleeding. And then I think maybe his white blood cells or something might have been slightly high, or I don't know, there was something else that was testing slightly high, but like not something you worry about. But then there was this weird result where the platelets were showing up as nothing. And I think the vet and I were both like a bit puzzled by that. It looked like an error. It was just like all the way down to the bottom of the chart. So that was odd. But then with the second part of the blood test, that was to look at pancreatitis, and he was actually testing in the range for suspected pancreatitis. So below 200 points was normal. Between 200 and 400 is suspected, and 400 and above is pancreatitis, and he was about 300. So initially the vet's advice was like, okay, put him on like some low-fat food. Yeah, and also for his voice, he had some antibiotics, because we weren't really sure what that was. You know, apparently dogs can get tonsillitis and things. Not really the same kinds of things we get as humans, but they can get some things. And then what else were you put on, Hopi? You had some other thing. Oh, reflux tablets, because, you know, maybe he was throwing up, and then the acids or something could be affecting his esophagus, which somehow affect, like, that doesn't really affect your voice, but I guess we're just thinking throat problems. Could be something like that. But then because the platelets count was so weird, the vet actually sent that off to a specialist. No, not a specialist, the lab. I'm getting confused because we've had so many interactions with like all kinds of parts of the veterinary system. But yeah, so the vet sent off his blood test results for a second opinion to an external lab who I think make the machines. Yeah, and then we went home with that, started him on the meds, and yeah, I think he seemed fine. Because he even walked just fine with me to the vet and all that, and he was actually walking better than he used to the vet, because he's got high anxiety problems, and I've spent like the past year trying to teach him to slow down on walks and not feel so anxious, and it actually worked. Like, he did get a little bit like, oh, I don't know about this, but yeah, successful. So my dodgy dog psychology walking technique has been a success. But yeah, so I think later that night the vet called back with the external lab results, and the platelets count was legitimately low, like it wasn't an error. And so oh, that was on a Tuesday. So yeah, they actually called, said, bring him back tomorrow, and we got to have another look at him, do more blood tests and so on. Now that was a day that I was working, so my mum had to take him in, and that night, like that Tuesday night when she said you got to bring him back, I just had a bit of a breakdown because I'm like, oh my god, he's got pancreatitis, and he's also got like some problem with his platelets. I can't remember if that vet gave us an idea of what it could have been, but I was just like, anytime I've had a dog have this many problems all at once, they haven't lasted. So I was sort of like freaking out that it could be a lot worse. And also, he's 8 years old, so none of my dogs have lived past the age of 10. And so in the past year, I've already been preparing for him to have some kind of issue, and yeah, it was sort of scary. But so when he went in on Wednesday with mum talked to their most senior vet, because I think, like, with COVID and stuff, I think they had one vet not there, because they had to go and get a test and everything's fine. But yeah, and then just like scheduling and so on. So they ended up seeing the most experienced vet in the practice, and she looked at his blood test results, did another blood test, and said, actually, this looks like immune-mediated thrombocytopenia. And so, she's explaining, some of the less experienced vets haven't seen this because it's not really a common problem. Yeah, and she reckoned he'd be fine in about 2 weeks just taking prednisolone, which I think is a corticosteroid. And so he's been on that. He has to have one every 12 hours, which has been really difficult for me, waking up at 6:30 every morning, because I've got to fit it in I've got to fit it in before I have bonsai, because like once a week I go to bonsai, but I have to start early. So I've got to make sure it fits in there. But it gets more complicated later on because we had to add other meds, and you can't eat before and after. And it's just, so I've been waking up early to give him the steroids, and then he has it at night as well. But anyway, so steroids, he actually seemed to improve a bit after that. But they're like, keep bringing him in. So he's got more blood tests. So then the next day, again, another blood test. And we started to see a pattern where actually his red blood cell count started to drop. His reticulocytes were still increasing, and his platelets still not registering at all. And then I ended up seeing, I think, the second most experienced vet, because they work different shifts. And yeah, so he's also had a bit of diarrhea, and so I had to bring in some poo for them to have a look at. Oh my god, because yeah, his poo was actually really black and runny, which is like, if you have a dog with black runny poo, take him straight to the vet, because it's probably blood in there. Yeah, and so he had a bit of that. And then even when he was on the steroids for a bit and the poo sort of became a normal looking, when I took it in the second lot, she opened it up, and I was there when she opened it up. Thank God it wasn't smelly, but it had blood still in it, and like I could see it as someone who doesn't know much vet stuff. Yeah, wow. So that was stressful. And then yeah, like the steroids, he did seem to be improving at that point, but his blood test just kept coming back with this trend of lower red blood cells, more reticulocytes, no platelets. And I think on the Friday that week, we might have sent it to the external lab again, and when that result finally came back, it was even lower than before. So I think it went from a score of about 41 to 8, which is really bad. And so the vet was saying, like, he might need to see a specialist about that, and I was just like, shit. So on the Sunday I went back, because he was then in outpatient mode, because they're like, usually when a dog has this, we would keep him at the vet so we can, keep an eye on him and keep monitoring and so on, but because of his anxiety, they let him come home with us, because that's probably the best thing for him. Yeah, so he was in outpatient mode, and I just had to keep bringing him back every 1 to 2 days. And on the Sunday, I think that's when we started getting into concerning territory with his red blood cells, because they had just stopped, like they were stopped around 30-ish. 30%, I think. And she was saying, like, if it gets too low, say down to 17%, then he's going to need a blood transfusion. And I was like, crap. And because his platelets were still not there, what she was concerned about was if he starts bleeding, he could just bleed out. And then, yeah, that's another reason you'd need the blood transfusion, and it could just, like, even though he was seeming fine on the steroids, at any moment, like, something could happen, and then he'd really be fucked. And another thing was, like, he could get, I don't know, there's just all kinds of things that could go wrong. So she was also saying, like, don't let him be active, so, I had to be careful with him. Walking to and from the vet was okay, but I think they were starting to worry a bit about that. And then also, like, don't clip his nails, because I think actually maybe the most experienced vet said don't clip his nails. Maybe that was earlier. Gee, I don't know. But basically, like, yeah, if he starts bleeding, he just might not stop. And then, like, especially internal bleeding, because you don't know when that's going to happen and what causes it. We don't know. We don't even know what caused his condition. Like, he could have eaten something, but they're like, probably not. Sometimes this just happens. It's spontaneous. So, yeah, on the Sunday, when she started talking about, like, how easily he could just bleed out, especially already having low blood cell count, low red blood cells, I was just like, fuck, okay, we'll go see the specialist. And the specialist, my gosh. So, yeah, the vet was like, you take him to the specialist, they can do, because she'd already talked actually to the specialist about his case. I'm sorry if I'm going in circles, I'm really tired and trying to remember everything that happened. But yeah, she was saying, look, they can do x-rays, they can do an ultrasound, particularly like the vocal cord thing is the thing that really confused the vets because it's not normal. Maybe I notice it because I'm a vocalist and I'm just like constantly paying attention to that kind of stuff. Because like I heard the vocal change first, but my family's like, no, I can't hear anything. I'm like, there's definitely a vocal change. And then it just sort of got worse over the time. But yeah, the vets are like, there could be something there. Like it could be a cancer maybe we need to look for, or who knows, like whether something's lodged there. So x-rays, ultrasounds, and they're giving me the cost for that. Apparently the vet could do that, but yeah, like for a cheaper as well. But I think like in terms of sedation or whatever, because he would be so anxious. But they were also saying the specialist can actually do a CT scan, which shows not just like your bones and stuff, not just hard things, but you can also see soft tissues. What's going on, Hopi? So if there is a soft tissue thing, a CT scan would pick it up, whereas an ultrasound and x-ray might not. But for a CT scan, he would have to be not sedated, he'd have to be under a general anesthetic. And Mum and I are very nervous about that kind of thing. I remember being under a general to get my wisdom teeth out and a little plate put in. Yeah, and it does knock you around a bit. So back in the day also, 10, 20 years ago, it was a bit rougher. Anyway, so we go to the specialist, and the specialist is recommending the CT scan, and we're just like, oh, okay. Yeah, Mum came with me to that, and the specialist was explaining today's general anesthetics, they're much easier, and like we've got all the monitoring gear. As specialists, we actually have people who just do anesthetics, so they're very experienced, like, safer than doing it at a regular vet and all that kind of stuff. So in the end, we're like, okay, let's do the thing. And then when we, like, later on, so what they did, while he was under general, I think they had a look down his throat, as well as doing the CT scan, which I think maybe they did his whole body because he's so small. They didn't find anything, like, cancerous or anything. Doesn't rule it out, because, like, you can have microscopic ones that just you can't see. But, yeah, they couldn't find anything, and then when they looked down his throat, they didn't find anything, but they did see that it was very bruised and it had obviously been bleeding. It was very unusual. Don't know what caused it. There's nothing obvious there. But now they can see why his voice changed, because there was a lot of bleeding going on, bruising and whatever. Yeah, but they didn't find anything else wrong with him. It's just immune-mediated thrombocytopenia, and he's probably bleeding in his intestine somewhere, but no real cause can be identified for that. I guess just like regular wear and tear, usually your body's repairing it, but because he has no platelets, he can't repair it. Yeah, so anyway, she said, look, his platelet count's really low still, and he's clearly not doing well. We're going to have to give him some immunosuppressants, so not just the corticosteroids. He's now on mycophenolate, Mofetil, which is a liquid thing I have to put in his mouth. It's like 0.2 mils or 0.25 mils, some tiny amount because he's a tiny dog. So I have to get these tiny little syringes. I'm used to Mikey, my disabled brother. He has these like bigger ones that you put in his mouth, and I'm used to seeing them. But then we've got these tiny little ones for Hope that are the same thing. It's adorable. But then they also had to give him vincristine, which is a chemotherapy drug. And it's all getting very expensive. God, I think that day cost almost $5,000. So lucky for me, the government stimulus is giving me more money than I'd usually have. Far out. But yeah, so vincristine. The idea of that is it stimulates. So the mycophenolate, which is the immunosuppressant, obviously suppresses his immune system. His immune system is what's attacking his platelets, so trying to calm that down. The steroids also help suppress the immune system. That's the point of those. But yeah, that's all that side of things. The vincristine, on the other hand, what I could understand from the internet is it sends a signal to the bone marrow, I think, where a lot of this stuff is produced, and it says, it sends a stress signal and says, okay, instead of producing normal platelets, we need you to produce like super platelets. So they're bigger and, you know, I guess they try and do the job better. So that's what that was for. Now, vincristine, you have to be careful how you give it, but they're experts, so we had no problems with that. But kind of hardcore, right? And for the first couple days after he had that, because it's chemotherapy, we had to be very careful picking up all his poo because, you know, we don't want the other dog to like sniff it and get a face full of chemotherapy stuff that's come out. Except that his poo was still really runny, so I ended up just getting a watering can and tipping that over his poo. And same with his wee, we also had to like water it down wherever he did it for those first few days, just to like make sure it's diluted and soaking into the grass, rather than causing any problems. So like huge dramas with all that. Oh my god. When he came home, obviously he'd been under a general anesthetic, so he was very quiet and kind of wobbly and kind of confused. It was kind of adorable how confused he was. So he got lots of hugs. It took him a while to start eating again, but like, you know, we gave him nice chicken and all this kind of stuff. We really started spoiling because, when did it happen? Very early on. See, this is me. I should have written down points, but very early on they're like, okay, he has this condition. Don't feed him hard food anymore. No dental treats. I think they were initially okay with him eating his usual dry food, but at some point they're like, no, just give him wet food only, because if any of that like scratches a gum, he would just bleed. And actually, before I took him in, I had noticed this weird black stuff on his teeth, and he does have bad teeth. He does need to have dental work done at some point to scrape off all the crap, but this was different black stuff, and when I got a toothpick to scrape it, it actually comes off. And I later found out that that was probably just blood that had just stuck to his teeth, so he probably had bled from there for a bit. Yeah, so he had to feed himself food, and like after he had the general anesthetic, you know, we got some nice chicken and just steamed it. You can either steam or boil it. You don't want to fry it or anything or introduce any extras. You just, yeah. So we've got the steam oven. Oh my god, I haven't shown you guys the kitchen since we renovated it. Oh well. Yeah, we have a steam oven now, and so Mum's been doing that, preparing the chicken for him, and he really liked it. But his appetite was still low. Yeah, and then a couple days after the general, he did start to perk up. Like his tail was finally standing up, instead of just between his legs all the time, and he was finally starting to be a bit more alert and less confused about things. But then towards the end of that same day where he seemed better, I got this vibe that he was sort of withdrawing again. And then the next day, the next day he was due for another specialist checkup, like post-general anesthetic, and to check on the vincristine and the new medication, immunosuppressant. You know, he was already scheduled for a checkup, but that morning I noticed he was just sort of lying down, just watching everyone from a random spot, like not even one of his favorite spots. Usually, like right now, he's hopped up onto the ledge of the couch. Like he has certain spot he likes to sit, and he was just lying in a spot that was just random, not one of his usual spots, just watching people. And then when he did stand up, he was so wobbly. I was like, oh my god, he's in a really bad way. I even had to lift him up and take him to the water bowl, and then he's like very slowly having a drink. And it reminded me of Max. Some of you who've been watching me for a long time will remember my dog Max, who is also a little dog. He's a Chinese crested, and towards the end he had like a sort of I think like a spinal degeneration or something. So he lost the use of his back legs. He became incontinent. Mum put little nappies on him. And yeah, there was a point where he couldn't really get up to have a drink. And that is about the point that we had to put him down. So when Hope was needing to be carried to the water bowl, I was really freaking out. I was like, far out. And, you know, he obviously hadn't really recovered from the whole general anesthetic chemotherapy and all this kind of shit. And yeah, it was really upsetting. So that day I was like, you know, I talked to Mum before we went to the vet, and I'm like, look, we might be talking about palliative care at this point, because he just seemed we didn't think he was going to make it. We thought we were going to lose him. Yeah, very stressful time. So when we actually got to the vet, and you know, she could see he was not in a good way, she did his blood tests, and yeah, apparently his heartbeat was really fast, and his red blood cells had dropped to 10%, which is just like, oh my God. So that explains why he had no energy. He was properly anemic. And like, I sort of knew that was happening because I think the day before, my local vet had called me, because obviously they're talking to the specialist, because once he's done with the specialist, he'll be doing ongoing checkups with the regular vet. So they're keeping them in the loop. And like, she had mentioned on the phone the day before that he was actually anemic from his last blood test. And so I was already worried, but yeah, then when they told me that, when we took him in, yeah, and so the specialist was like, look, he needs a blood transfusion. And this is the point we didn't want to get. And the thing that confused me a lot is, like, with dogs, with blood tests, with blood transfusions, the first blood transfusion's fine, but after that it becomes very risky. The chances of a reaction get a lot worse. So I was worried about that. I thought if he has one blood transfusion and then needs another, like, he's fucked. Oh, Hopi. He's just got his dad going out. But yeah, so... But so the specialist was like, don't worry about it, we can do tests to make sure that if he needs another blood transfusion, we know exactly what blood to give him, which I didn't realize that they could test for these things, like, in such detail. The vet specialist technology has really moved on since like 10 years ago with my previous dogs. You know, like, they got to a point where there was nothing we could do to really treat them, whereas I think if we had them today, maybe we could have done something for them. But yeah, did Dad go out, guys? Is that why you're all... They want to be let out. Let me just pause the video and sort the dogs out, and then we'll get back into it from the transfusion thing. Okay, I think we're good. So back to the blood transfusion day. So the specialist was saying, actually, like, it's quite safe. We can do the tests, like, at the same time he's having his blood transfusion, we can do the tests to make sure that next time we know exactly what he needs, what type of blood, you know, if he does need further blood transfusions. And she also assured us that, like, because he was anemic, like, once he had the blood transfusion, he'd actually feel a lot better, and there'd be, like, no real side effects at that stage. And they said, like, when they do the blood transfusion, they go very slowly at the beginning, because if there is going to be a reaction, it happens almost straight away. So, yeah, they were really good at assuring us that it was fine, and it's the best thing for him and all that. And it also didn't cost as much as I thought it was going to. So it was about, just for the blood transfusion itself, oh my God, I'm distracted by my hair. How terrible is that? Yeah, no, for the transfusion itself was like about $800, which is a lot better than I thought it was going to be. Like, the local vet had made it sound like it was going to be thousands and thousands. But yeah, obviously there's other costs around that, because we're also doing other tests to make sure everything's okay. And so it did end up being a fair bit more than that. But yeah, no, the cost wasn't as much as I thought it was going to be. And Mum's like, we've got to give him the best chance. And I thought, yep, sure. So we did that. Yeah, but it was very nerve-wracking, and this time we had to leave him overnight. And you know, they know we've explained that he has anxiety problems, so we were very nervous about that. And they said, look, there's a chance you could pick him up, but it takes maybe 6 hours or so for the blood transfusion, and then got to check him. So we wouldn't be able to get him back until like between 1 and 3 a.m. in the morning. And we're just like, okay, we'll let him stay the night. And at that point, he was so weak and very passive that we just thought, well, he's not going to cause any trouble anyway. You know, he's so weak that if he is anxious, he'll just snooze. Like, he probably doesn't have the energy to be anxious. So yeah, we left him there and then picked him up the next day. And finally, some positives. So about 1 hour into his transfusion, I actually got a text from the specialist saying like he was fine, everything's good, no reactions so far, and they said they'd call if there were any issues, and they didn't call, so good, that's already good news. Yeah, so that made me feel a lot better, having waited around and all that. I did have to go back to drop off his mycophenolate because apparently they don't have much of that, which is interesting. That tells you how rare this condition is. That they don't, and especially like most of the time when you have immune-mediated thrombocytopenia, the corticosteroids prednisolone is all you need for most dogs, but for some reason he didn't respond to that. So yeah, the stage that he's at, that's what made me so nervous, is he got to this stage that's very unusual. You know, 1 in 5 dogs doesn't make it. So I was really like, I don't like those odds. Those are not good odds to me. Like if it was 1 in 100, maybe I'd chill, but 1 in 5, fuck. But yeah, no, like one of the vets had explained to me that, you know, 25 years ago when she first started being a vet, if a dog got this condition, prednisolone was all you could do for it, and it was a 50-50 chance whether or not they'd survive. Maybe you could do an x-ray to check something else, but the condition itself, nah, there's not a lot of chance. But yeah, so getting confused again, but the day we picked him up after his blood transfusion, he was actually so much brighter. Like the change was really noticeable. Very, very like, it's crazy. Like, and I later read that even when you're a human, if you have a blood transfusion, chances are you'll feel pretty good afterwards if anemia was the issue. So yeah, no, and when we brought him home, he was so excited. He was, you know, getting pats. He was really happy to see everyone, which is just like the hugest change, because the day before we thought he was going to die, and he probably would have if we'd done nothing. And then the next day he's like, hello, I am home. So yeah, that was really positive. And then, you know, after he sort of calmed down again, he chilled out and just having a relax, and like the specialist, was, you know, the specialist hospital, they're just telling us, look, just try and get him to relax. He's going to feel a lot better at the moment, but he's not allowed to go for walks still. Don't play with the toy too much, like maybe gently, but don't get him doing any like intense excitement kind of stuff. Stay on the wet foods. By then he'd finished his antibiotics and the reflux tablets. He finished that a while back. But he's still taking prednisolone twice a day, mycophenolate twice a day. The vincristine was a one-off only. He'd also been given something to try and stop his diarrhea, but he didn't like that, so they said you don't have to make him eat it if he doesn't want it. Yeah, is that everything? I'm sorry, I'm so tired that my thoughts aren't organized. But yeah, it's been a real ordeal. Since the blood transfusion, oh, did I mention the mycophenolate is the one that he can't eat for an hour before and half an hour after. So that's why I'm constantly waking up at 6:30. Because I know like I could wake up slightly later because I don't have to leave for my bonsai job on that one day that I have it until after 8 o'clock. But I try and make it the first thing I do, because then he has to wait half an hour and then he can have breakfast. And then I just get on with all the things I need to do to get ready to go to work. Whereas if I did it later, I worry that I would be in such a rush to get to work that I'd forget to do some stage of the process. Oh my gosh, Marley. It's having a stretch. Yeah, so that's why I'm waking up at 6:30 every day, just so that every day it's the same time. And 6:30, get up, give him meds, 7 o'clock, give him breakfast, and then most days I go back to bed until about 10 or 11 because it's exhausting. And then he has to have same thing in the evening, and it all conflicts because like Marley's got to have his breakfast and dinner as well. And yeah, Hope kind of just has to watch because, you know, he's used to having it earlier, and that's just like the whole dog politics of them watching each other eat food. So when Hope has his really nice, he's so spoiled. Sometimes he has chicken and rice, and sometimes tuna. I've still got that low-fat dog food that they recommended when they thought he had pancreatitis. because I'm worried he's going to get fat from all the food he's been eating. Mum found some My Dog tins on special at Woolies, so we've got some of that now. He's had some other complimentary food. He's just being spoiled, and I'm a bit worried that he's putting on weight. I've got to weigh him again today because I'm just like, I don't know. And yeah, at the moment he's also having lunch, so I've got to give him lunch in a bit because he's probably waiting for that. I haven't even had my lunch. One day his lunch looked nicer than mine. Like, it was that complimentary food that looked like this full-on gourmet rice and vegetables and meat dish, whereas I was just having leftover pasta. But yeah, no, he has lunch now because the steroids make him really hungry. He's been so greedy. Like, he's greedier than a standard Labrador. Marley is not a very good example of a Labrador in terms of greed. He's kind of dumb about food. So Hope is definitely the Labrador in the house at the moment. Yeah, so greedy. So he has lunch, and see, I think part of the problem also is usually when he has dry food, when we normally feed him that, we just leave it out all day and he grazes through the day, whereas now because it's wet food and he's so hungry, he eats it all, and then he's like, there's no food in the middle of the day, so I give him lunch to try and sort of make up for the fact that there's no dry food just hanging around for him. But yeah, so anyway, since he had his blood transfusion, which is maybe far out, the time has sort of gone crazy. I think maybe 3 weeks ago, and then maybe 2.5 weeks ago, and then over the weekend and then the Monday we had to take him in for another checkup to see how he was going with his post blood transfusion recovery, and he was really happy, and they did another blood test, and they also sent that off to an external lab because I think it's a bit hard to get the platelets count because he had the vincristine and that was finally starting to work, and the vincristine, because it makes, this is what I think. I should have asked exactly why it was hard to count the platelets, but I think she said something about them being different sizes, and I think that's to do with the vincristine causing super platelets, stress platelets or whatever, which are bigger than your normal platelets, and then the mycophenolate suppressing the immune system so that he gets normal platelets as well, and they're all mixed up. I think maybe their machine can't detect that, so they need to send it to the external lab to confirm. But yeah, they haven't called us with any issues with that, so yeah, and they were really happy with how much he'd perked up, and I think even by then his poos might have become more normal. We've sort of been watching the color has gradually returned to normal, and also the consistency, instead of being runny all the time, it's a normal colored poo, and yeah, he's peeing a lot. That's a side effect of the steroids, I think, and he's also drinking a lot. But yeah, no, and then since that, it's on Monday, it'll be 2 weeks since his last specialist appointment, so he's going again. Yeah, since then he's just gotten better and better. At the last appointment, she said, look, don't change anything, keep giving him the same drugs, don't, you can start taking him for gentle walks, but be very careful. So we haven't taken him for walks at all, we're just being really cautious. But yeah, he's gotten much happier. I had to fix a toy for him, we could start playing with the toy indoors. So I got one, and here it is. I think this was his Christmas present. So it's got a Choopy and a Choopy and these, and you can see I've already had to fix it a few times, and oh my god, the Choop Choop is the call, isn't it? So I've had to fix that a few times just to give him some stimulation because he can't go for walks still. The problem with the walks, okay, so now that he has platelets, he's less likely to bleed everywhere if he gets the smallest injury. But what the ongoing concern is, because he's on immunosuppressants, if he comes near another dog or another dog's poo or wee or something, he's more likely to catch something from them, because yeah, his immune system is just not operating the same way as normal. Also, we have to change, so he was due for his Bravecto and Milbamax, I think on the 20th, but because of all the things he was going through and all the medications he's been having, they said hold off on that, don't give him anything extra. So he hasn't been flea treated, tick treated, or wormed yet. So Yeah, and then when I asked her about that, the specialist at our last appointment, she's like, what's he usually on?" And she doesn't want him to be on Bravecto anymore because Bravecto lasts for 3 months, so that means it's in his system for longer. And if he has a reaction, it's harder to deal with and get out of the system. And like it's been fine for his life so far, but because he now has all these medical issues, she just wants him to be on something that doesn't last as long. Um, so I've got NexGard Spectra for him, but I'm gonna wait until Monday and ask her then. Make sure I got the right one because there's a few different ones. And just like, make sure everything's good, make sure she's happy that he can have it now that he's a lot healthier. I guess we're probably going to do another blood test. Um, and then the next step, I think she said he's probably going to come off his steroids first, because it seems like the mycophenolate is what's actually helping him recover rather than the steroids. So if he can come off the steroids and not be so hungry all the time, that'll be nice. He's also been a bit frisky, so I've had to like chase him off Marley's back a few times because I don't want him to get embarrassing boy problems, which he's had in the past. Um, yeah, if you want the TMI, basically his dick comes out of the sheath and then gets stuck. Um, and then you have to go to the late night vet and give him a like $250 sugar bath to make it go back in. I'm just like, yeah, let's try and avoid that. He hasn't had that problem since I started trimming the fur around there, but obviously, they don't want us to trim his nails at the moment and, avoid, getting anything sharp near him. So I haven't done that in a bit. Oh, Dad's back. Let me just pause and close a door because he will be very distracting while he comes back in. All right, where was I? It's been really hard to film lately just because, like, there's always someone in the house besides me at the moment, and it's just like, my brain just gets a little bit more muddled than usual when I'm trying to film and there's like noises happening around the house. But yeah, no, so, yeah, no, it would be good if you can come off the steroids, one less thing to deal with. Um, and yeah, so the idea is to sort of gradually get him off the medications. Hopefully, we can do that. Um, yeah, I don't know how it works. Like, apparently, you can eventually get them off all the medications, and maybe you'll have a relapse later on, and then you have to control it again. But it sounds like it is possible to get him off medication, and I don't understand how that works with like the immune system and so on. Because like usually, I guess like they talk about with like coronavirus, for example, maybe you don't stay immune to it forever. So maybe it's something like that. Like once you calm down the immune system, maybe it'll stop attacking himself. I don't know. But yeah, so try and wean him off the steroids first, and then maybe he can come off the mycophenolate at some point, which would be nice because then maybe I could sleep in. Or maybe he could just have it once a day, and then I can just do it in the afternoon and not have to wake up so early all the time. But yeah, so he's basically going to have ongoing treatment for like months. She said the mycophenolate will be for months. So we've got like, this bottle that'll last him quite a while. Yeah, and then he's going to have ongoing appointments. So at the moment, we're still doing appointments with a specialist. So on Monday, we'll finally be talking about whether he can start coming off something. So obviously, they do more blood tests. But when he does start coming off stuff, I think there'll be even more blood tests because then they've got to make sure that it's not like surging again. Yeah, so it's going to be a long process and it's also going to be expensive. Like oh my God, how much have I spent already? Because yeah, the first week just going to the regular vet was almost $1,000, and then what he had that day that was almost 5,000, getting the general anesthetic and all that, and then he had the blood transfusion, which was another like $1,500. So yeah, by the end of this, it is probably going to be $10,000. Wow. But they've been very optimistic about his recovery. They're like, look, he's actually a young dog. And for a little dog, like little dogs can go quite a while. Plus he's a crossbreed, so he's less likely to have those kinds of disorders that purebreds have. Yeah, and they're like, look, he'll probably live at least another like 5 years or so. We want to treat him and give him the best chance of that. And I kind of agree with that. Yeah, so yeah, they're very positive about his prospects. And like in terms of treating him, like yes, it's a lot of money. I'm very lucky that it happened now when I'm getting a lot more JobKeeper money than I usually would. just shoving it straight back in the economy, which is what they want, right? Um, but yeah, so like for example, if you guys have been following my Final Fantasy videos, I don't know if I'm going to be able to finish that because I lost like almost a whole month of my free 3 month whatever. And then after that, I'm not going to pay for more because I know it's only like, I think it's like $5 a month or $10 a month to keep getting Xbox Game Pass or whatever, but I'm not really a gamer and I've just spent so much money looking after this dog. Like I always keep a stash of extra money for events like this. But yeah, after I spent so much on my computer and now $10,000 dog. Yeah, no, I'm just not going to be able to spend extra money on anything really anymore. So RIP to that. But no, the reason like the reason I spend so much. So some people are like, oh, it's just a dog, they come and go and whatever. But he's a part of the family for one thing. And then also like with our previous dogs, like because we couldn't really do anything at the time, and I was younger as well, so and I've had depression on and off, so I've not exactly been the most useful in those departments. But because we couldn't really do very much, I did go through a phase after they had to be put down of sort of wondering like, what could I have done? Like maybe I could have done this or this or this to, get them through it. Maybe they could have lived longer, and it's kind of a sucky feeling. With my little dog Max as well, because I wasn't living here, I was living out west with the douchebag. But another story. So I wasn't here for him when he had to be put down, and that ate at me for a long time. And then, yeah, with my Labrador, when she had to be put down the following year, I made sure I was at the vet for that and like patting her and all that kind of stuff. It was pretty emotional. So I was just thinking like, this time we can do something for this guy. Like, they have this specialist hospital who are really good. They really know what they're doing. The technology that's available for dogs is better. Like you can actually do CT scans for dogs. I had no idea that that was even an option, and like within a budget that I could just fit. So yeah, I was just like, well, if I can do all these things, I need to do them, because if we lose him and I could have done something, then it's going to play on me for a long time. And most of you guys know I've had problems with depression. The last thing I need is something to set that off again. So, yeah, I was just like, no, I got to do everything I can for this dog. It's not just about him. I'm not just spending money on him. I'm spending money on my mental health. Now, speaking of, that's an interesting thing, because this is turning into a really long blog. But yeah, I've actually felt like through this, yes, I've had days where I was crying and like feeling really terrible, but it's a different kind of thing to when I was depressed. I've been depressed enough times now to know what that feels like, and it turns out normal sadness really does feel different, like proper grief and concern and all that. And so I've been feeling like, regardless of what was going to happen to him, the day that we took him before we knew he had to have a transfusion, I think, and then even after I had the transfusion and all that, like going through that worst day, the worst day of this was when he had to have the transfusion. I sort of could feel in me like, I'm not heading for depression. I actually feel like this is normal sadness and I'm not going to spiral. That was a very interesting thing for me, to not be spiraling. I was expecting I would spiral and it didn't happen. And I sort of had this sense that I wasn't going to spiral. So I think that's progress for me in my mental health. Like maybe I'm finally past that point where all these little things going wrong just destroy me. Like maybe I've finally got some resilience that I didn't have before. So that's a positive to realize about myself from all this. Yeah. Anyway, so what have I missed from this really long story? Oh, he started losing a bit of hair. I was just playing with a bit of hair down there. So I think that's probably from the chemotherapy, but he only lost a little bit of hair and he seems to have stopped. He seems completely back to normal pretty much. Yeah, but there were some big chunks of hair floating around from him. Usually it's only from the Labrador. He loses big chunks of hair every now and then. Probably because he's Dave's dog and Dave doesn't brush him as much. So anyway, yeah, no, Hope's pretty good. I've only been giving him gentle brushes with like the soft side of a puppy brush. That's why he still looks okay instead of a matted mess. Yeah, have we been through everything? Oh my god, it's just been like this huge drama. So that's why I disappeared from YouTube for a bit, because I just couldn't focus on anything else. It's like, shit, I have to look after him. And then, you know, because he was feeling sad, I had to give him a lot of cuddles. And I was also like constantly monitoring what was going on with him. When he wasn't eating, like I was trying to find ways to see if he'd be interested in eating and all that. But no, he's really bounced back since the blood transfusion. So the combination of medications, and then that little boost. After his blood transfusion, he only jumped to 24% of his red blood cell count, but that's out of the danger zone, so that's fine. And I'm hoping at his next appointment, his red blood cell count will be higher, because even when it was at 30, the local vet was concerned. So hopefully now all the main problems are done and he could just completely recover properly. But we will see. There's still a chance that things could go backwards, and I really shouldn't sit here where I'm like constantly struggling with the sun. Yeah, that I think covers most of it. There's probably details I've left out, but I would have to sit and read all my Facebook posts again, and it'd just take forever. Like, some of them were like thousands of words long, because I'm trying to explain everything so that I can remember. And also have one friend who's a vet who's been following along, and so she can understand the things that I'm talking about. And, you know, she was saying, yeah, I think specialist is probably the right thing to do. And, you know, she was very reassuring as well. She doesn't live in Sydney anymore, so that kind of sucks. But yeah, no, oh, what an ordeal. He's a very lucky dog, and it looks like we're out of the worst well and truly. So yeah, hopefully I can get back to making my normal YouTube stuff. Sorry this video has been long and meandering, just with my brain trying to figure out where we're even at. I feel like there's something important I might have missed, and that's why I'm still like rambling trying to think about it. But yeah, no, you get the idea. So he's got an autoimmune disease. It's immune-mediated thrombocytopenia, which attacks his platelets, which means he can't clot. Which means when he had some kind of vocal damage and some kind of intestinal bleeding that just kept bleeding, and yeah, eventually he became anemic and needed a blood transfusion. They found nothing on his CT scan. Looking down his throat, they could only see that it was very bruised and bleeding. Yeah, and I think that's all the main things that he had done. Oh, I'm so tired. And now I've got to piece this video together. I hope it's not too much of a mess, and I hope you guys are all doing well. Not going for walks with Hope has been hard on me, because usually, like, I don't get a lot of exercise otherwise. We don't even go for long walks, but yeah, usually I come home and I have like Metamucil or something, so haven't been doing that, combined with anxiety about how he's been. For a while my stomach was a bit off too. But yeah, now I'm sort of getting back into more of a routine. I am always tired, so it's hard to be motivated to do very much. But I'm trying to get back onto things, trying to get back into some music stuff. I had a setback in my music life, which if you're on Patreon, you might have read about. But that's okay, I'm moving on. I've got another thing I'm going to try and audition for. If that fails, maybe I have to start my own band. Just get off my butt and just do it. I don't know. We'll see how things go. In terms of Punk Rave Australia, I have been talking to them. Obviously, coronavirus has messed up things for them as well, but we're still talking about doing some videos. So there's that. I will try and play as much of the Final Fantasy 15 as I can before my 3-month thing runs out, but I'm probably not going to get a chance to play anything else. So after that, we'll switch back to... Maybe I'll finish that Beyond Earth game we started, and I'll get on to Free Space 2 at some point as well. What else do I have plans for YouTube? Oh, I want to go on a rant about people who are obsessed with custom building their computers and keep commenting about that on my Alienware video, because that's getting on my nerves. I'm like, oh my god, you guys need to calm down. I think maybe I wrote down some other ideas, but I don't remember. And I need to post more stuff on Instagram, because I keep forgetting that too. There's too many things to do. Anyway, so I think that's probably long enough for this video. If I've forgotten any details, maybe I'll do a follow-up after he's had his checkup or something. But yeah, big dramas here for Hopi. but he's doing a lot better. And now I'm going to give him some lunch. Hopi, do you want lunch? Do you want some lunch? You're hungry. Oh, he is hungry. And Marley would like to lick the spoon, wouldn't you, huh? Dave doesn't want you to get too fat, so you can't have lunch, but you can lick the spoon if you'd like. All right. Now that they're saying end the video, I actually have to end the video. So I will see you guys whenever, and hopefully no more vet dramas, and we can get on with things. What do you think, Hopi? Lunchtime? You said lunchtime? You're hungry. Okay, see ya. You happy now, Hopi? Oh my gosh. Yeah, no, I forgot to mention his voice is back, and I just thought of it because while I was preparing his food, he was like, you know, really whining, like, hurry up! And, yeah, so with his voice, the low notes came back first, followed by the high notes, which actually follows a human pattern. Like when you get vocal fatigue as a human, usually you lose your high notes first and they're the last to come back. So yeah, it took a while for his high notes to come back. It's only in the last week or so that they've really started to get stronger. But he got his low notes back pretty quickly. I think maybe after the blood transfusion, it really started to pick up. He's still looking for food, the little shit. But yeah, so that's one thing I forgot. And also while I'm here, I might as well show you some of his stash. So he's got his low-fat food, and then he's got my dog, which was on special. Mum's kept a bit of rice for him, and I just finished the chicken stash. But then we have tuna chunks in spring water. Use spring water, not the oil one. We do have an olive oil one, but apparently this is better for him, so we've got that. Some of his meds in there. Chicken treats, and there's some Next Garden. Like, he can smell the treats in here, so sometimes he like hangs out behind there trying to get in through the back because it's an open back kind of thing. So lucky he can't figure out that. Oh my god. And then there's some more meds in the back there for him anyway. What are you doing? Huh? You're so greedy. Isn't he greedy? Hey, Marley. Marley. Alright, I think that's everything. Bet you I'll think of something while we're editing, hey? Dear oh dear.